you ever watched a moment on television so profoundly disturbing, so completely devoid of basic human empathy, that you actually had to pause the screen just to process the sheer audacity of it? That is exactly what we witnessed when Naomi Hawthorne finally gathered the insurmountable courage to reveal her BRCA-positive diagnosis to her father, Bill Hamilton. We all knew Bill was a classic narcissist. We all knew he had an ego the size of the entire country club. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared us for the masterclass in emotional cruelty he delivered to his own flesh and blood. It was a scene that completely redefined the toxic dynamics of the Hamilton family, and honestly, it might be the point of no return for Naomi. Let us rewind for a second and look at the agonizing, lonely journey Naomi has been on over the past few years. For the longest time, she has carried the suffocating weight of this genetic time bomb entirely on her own shoulders. She lied to her husband Jacob, terrified that the news would distract him during his highly dangerous, life-threatening undercover mission with the plasma ring. She kept it from her mother, Danny Dupree, not wanting to burden a woman who was already dealing with her own severe trauma and physical recovery. When Naomi finally started opening up, first to a fiercely supportive Jacob, then to a stunned Danny, and eventually to her cousins Kat, Chelsea, and Martin, we saw a woman desperately trying to reclaim her narrative. She was preparing for a double mastectomy, a grueling, life-altering preventative surgery that also brought up horrifying discussions about removing her ovaries and facing early menopause. Sitting down with Bill was supposed to be the final cathartic hurdle. She needed her father's strength. She needed his reassurance and unconditional love. The scene itself was framed with agonizing vulnerability. Naomi, usually so composed, so legally sharp, and professionally untouchable, was reduced to a terrified little girl looking for a safety net. Through tears, she poured her heart out, explaining the mutated gene, the terrifying cancer statistics, and her brave, heartbreaking decision to undergo a double mastectomy to save her own life. In any normal, functioning family, this is the exact moment a father wraps his arms around his daughter, tells her she is incredibly brave, and promises to move heaven and earth to support her through the medical nightmare. But this is beyond the gate. And this is Bill Hamilton. Instead of a warm, protective embrace, Naomi was met with a wall of cold, unadulterated fury. Bill did not flinch with concern. He recoiled with absolute disgust. He looked at his daughter not as a human being facing a terrifying medical crisis, but as a defective product that somehow tarnished his pristine, untouchable legacy. He actually had the unmitigated gall to blame the diagnosis on Danny's faulty Dupree genes. Let that sink in for a moment. In the face of his daughter's potential mortality, Bill's immediate instinct was to weaponize her genetics to take a petty, vindictive shot at his ex-wife. It was breathtakingly cruel, and it showcased a level of selfishness that borders on sociopathic. The sheer hypocrisy of Bill Hamilton is enough to give you severe whiplash. Let's not forget the context here. This is the exact same man who was just trapped in an elevator during a catastrophic tornado, passionately hooking up with Danny in a moment of primal panic. He still lusts after Danny, he still tries to manipulate her, and he still tries to gaslight her into thinking they belong together. Yet, the second something goes medically wrong with their shared offspring, he brands her bloodline as toxic and defective. Bill's reaction wasn't just poor parenting. It was a psychological defense mechanism rooted in extreme fragile narcissism. To Bill, illness is a weakness. He cannot process a reality where his golden child, the one he explicitly trusted to take over his company and his massive inheritance, is physically vulnerable. Instead of offering comfort, he projected his own deep-seated fear of weakness into a vicious, unforgivable attack on the women in his life. For Naomi, this was the shattering of a lifelong, carefully maintained. We have watched her defend Bill time and time again against Chelsea's very valid criticism. She has been his legal shield against Mike Davis, his confidant, and the one person who still managed to look at him with a shred of genuine respect. But as those venomous words left his mouth, you could literally see the light die in Naomi's eyes. The realization hit her like a runaway freight train. Her father does not love her unconditionally. He loves her merely as an extension of his own greatness. This wasn't just a disagreement over legal strategy or family politics. This was a fundamental severing of the father-daughter bond. Naomi was staring at a stranger, a cold, selfish, emotionally bankrupt stranger. But just as the emotional devastation reached its absolute peak, the universe, or rather a very specific, vindictive wife, intervened in the most dramatic way possible. Right in the middle of his cruel, narcissistic tirade, Bill's body finally betrayed him. We've seen the subtle hints all week long, the slight hand tremors during Dr. Madison Montgomery's deposition, the moments of physical weakness he stubbornly tried to brush off as mere stress, the abnormal blood test that he arrogantly ignored. But this was no subtle tremor. Bill was suddenly gripped by violent, uncontrollable convulsions. The wine glass he was holding slipped from his violently shaking fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor in a perfect cinematic metaphor for his broken family. He collapsed, completely incapacitated by the very physical weakness he had just mocked his daughter for fearing. The psychological torture for Naomi in this exact moment is almost too much to bear. Imagine the horrific sequence of events from her perspective. She delivers highly stressful, traumatic medical news to her father. He flies into a blind rage. Seconds later, he is convulsing on the floor, fighting for air. Naomi's immediate, horrifying conclusion is that she did this. She believes with every fiber of her being that the stress of her BRCA confession triggered a massive, fatal stroke. The suffocating guilt that washed over her was palpable through the screen. She went from being the victim of a vicious verbal attack to believing she was the direct cause of her father's fatal medical emergency. It is a level of emotional trauma that will undoubtedly require years of therapy with Carlton to unpack, and it threatens to completely destroy her mental health just as she needs to be strong for her surgeries. But we, the audience, know the chilling, sinister truth. Naomi's news didn't cause this. The so-called faulty Dupree genes didn't cause this. This catastrophic physical breakdown is the direct, undeniable result of Haley Hamilton's meticulous, slow burn poisoning campaign. For weeks, Haley has been secretly lacing Bill's drinks with her special juice, carefully calculating the toxic dosage to mimic the exact symptoms of a natural stroke or a transient ischemic attack, TIA. She has endured Bill's insults, his financial control, his gross sexual demands, and the humiliating knowledge of his lingering obsession with Danny. She even teamed up with her sketchy cousin Randy Parker to accelerate the timeline because they feared a toxicology report might expose them. This collapse was the grand finale of her lethal masterpiece. And where was our resident Black Widow while this dual tragedy was unfolding in the study? She was standing quietly at the door, hiding in the shadows, watching the chaos ensue. Haley witnessed Bill's cruel rejection of Naomi. She watched her husband begin to seize and collapse to the floor. And she watched her stepdaughter spiral into a pit of unwarranted, agonizing guilt. Did Haley rush in to help? Did she show a single ounce of human decency or panic? Absolutely not. A smug, victorious smile crept across her face. Her plan was working flawlessly. The timing was so macabre, so perfectly aligned with the family drama, that it provided her with the ultimate, impenetrable smokescreen. You truly have to hand it to Haley. She is playing a terrifyingly smart, diabolical game. By allowing the natural, toxic dynamics of the Hamilton family to play out, she is creating the perfect alibi for murder. Who is going to suspect foul play when Bill has a documented history of high stress, abnormal blood tests, and a famously explosive temper? When the brilliant doctors at Garland Memorial, even someone as sharp as Madison, look at Bill, they will see a man who suffered a stress-induced neurological event following a heated, screaming argument with his daughter. Haley doesn't even have to lift a finger to cover her tracks. The family's own deep-rooted dysfunction is doing all the heavy lifting for her. It is evil, yes, but it is undeniably brilliant. There is a profound, twisted irony in Bill's situation that we cannot ignore. His ultimate downfall is entirely paved by his own towering ego. If he had been a loving, attentive father in that moment, if he had pulled Naomi into a hug, sat her down, and listened to her fears, he might have been calm and collected. He might have been able to recognize his physical symptoms and communicate them to a daughter who desperately wanted to help him. Instead, his narcissistic rage isolated him in his final conscious moments. He pushed away the one person who actually cared about his well-being, leaving himself entirely at the mercy of the woman who was actively, gleefully trying to murder him. Bill Hamilton engineered his own demise long before Haley ever spiked his drink. The ripple effects of this single explosive scene are going to be monumental for the entire canvas of Fairmont Crest. When Bill is rushed to the ER, the medical mystery will deepen. Will Grand Medicine's relentless pursuit of the truth finally uncover the synthetic toxins in his blood? How will Danny react when she learns that Bill used her genetics as a weapon against their daughter, just days after their secret elevator tryst? Will Andre finally realize the extent of the toxic web his wife is caught in? And what happens to Naomi? The unbearable weight of this false guilt could completely derail her upcoming preventative surgeries and push her away from Jacob just when they were finally reconnecting. Haley might be smiling now, but she is playing a very dangerous game with people who have absolutely nothing. As we wait for the next episode, we are left staring at the shattered pieces of the Hamilton dynasty. Bill's ego has finally met its match in Haley's lethal ambition, and poor Naomi is caught in the crossfire of a war she didn't even know was happening. But here is the ultimate question we have to ask ourselves, the one that will keep us up at night. When the truth about the poisoning finally comes to light, and Naomi realizes she wasn't the cause of her father's collapse, will she even care that he's dying? Or did Bill Hamilton's cruel, unforgivable words already kill the father she loved long before Haley's poison ever took her? Let that simmer, and we will see you next time.